So I don't have a cameraman again. I don't know how I keep scheduling things this way. Anyway, so good morning and welcome to this morning's medieval coronet unboxing. I received yesterday a very felicitous notification in the mail that that I would soon be getting to see for the first time my brand new committal coronet. So let me just open this up on my laptop so that I can make sure I can actually communicate with you all and that you can actually hear me, because of course we have had sound issues before, unsurprisingly. That is just the way of the world, as it were. Okay. So if you can't hear me, please let me know. Unfortunately, it seems like there's no one yet on who can tell me, but at least I can see myself and everything seems to be working. Okay. Welcome to my world. I'm a one-person production company. So this coronet is a replica. It's based on a historic model. There are not many coronets from the Middle Ages that have survived, mostly in part because they have been melted down over the centuries and their component parts used to make something else. Because the reality about medieval jewelry is that even though it could be ornate and it could be a splendid example of the medieval jeweler's craft, people didn't view the jewelry for the value of its craftsmanship. They viewed it for the value of its component parts. And so the gold, metal, or the precious metals and the precious and semi-precious stones were more valuable separately than as a component piece, like a coronet. So frequently what would happen is coronets would get taken apart after the death of their owner if they weren't buried with them and would be turned into something else. Or in the case of war, sometimes camps were sacked and committal and ducal and even royal coronets and crowns were taken and then either put in church treasuries in Switzerland in the case of Charles the Bold, or again, melted down into turning something else. Often in that case, probably chalices and crosses for various churches and cathedrals. Yay! Oh, Tommaso, you're so dedicated. Here you are. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning your time. Thank you for joining. Okay, so I brought with me for today's unboxing a very excellent book. If you're interested in books on medieval or royal jewelry specifically, then this book, Royal Jewels from Charlemagne to the Romanovs, can be very interesting because it actually has, I think, some of the few pictures of some of the few coronets and crowns that have actually survived. But not just that, it has beautiful pendants and collars, and so I thought I would bring this out, and once we open this I would show you some of the other extant examples of royal jewelry and royal headwear. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Beautifully boxed. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Wow. This is a truly stunning piece of jeweler's art. Wow. Yeah, so this is based on an extant piece. And if I'd been clever, I would have double checked what the extant piece is. Hold on a minute. Let me just go to Armour and Casting's website. Because this is a replica of, like I said, one of the few ones that has survived. And specifically, it's not designed at all to be worn on the naked head. Coronets and crowns were never worn this way. This would give you a headache. This is a pretty solid piece of metal. It probably weighs, let me see what the measurement on the box says. Feels like it weighs about 2 pounds maybe. It says here 1 pound, 1 ounce in the official declaration. So it's a significant piece of headwear. And like I said, it's never meant to be worn on the naked head. They were meant to be worn on a pad or on a coif or on some other piece of headwear. And I can actually show you an example of another piece of headwear here because Charles the Bold wore his ducal coronet, one of the ways in which he wore it was over top of a hat. Let me see if I think I saw that picture in here as I was scrolling through. There's a after Charles the Bold's encampment was sacked at the Battle of Nancy, after he died, all of his regalia that was with him, and he had quite a bit, all of his tapestries, all of his jewelry basically made its way to Switzerland thanks to the mercenaries who were fighting in that battle. Right, this isn't the one I was thinking of specifically, but you can see it. So this is Charles, a sketch of the hat, of what I call the coronet hat that was sacked at the Battle of Granson. And you can see there's a coronet sort of band around the base where there would normally, in a modern hat, be a satin ribbon or something, or in a fedora would be a satin ribbon. Yeah, so it should be worn over something. And if you look in the 15th century, especially, what you'll see often are, especially for ladies, that their coronets are worn over top of whatever headdress they're on, and that often the coronets were designed to sort of actually follow the lines, like in those great padded rolls, or the butterfly hennons, as they're sometimes called. Of course, hennon is a 19th century word for that kind of hat. But you can see that the coronet is actually designed to literally follow the lines. Yeah, so these are semi-precious stones and glass. So yeah, this is really beautiful. And I will be wearing it. I actually have my, not a hennon, my ouateur, as it's called in French, or mitre, or horn, as it's called in the English of the era. And let's see. Yeah, I thought about waiting to do this till I was at Penzig when I would have ladies in waiting and all of that, but I didn't want to wait that long. So, mitre goes on. Okay, and then the coronet just slides over top and sits like that. Now, granted, there'll be a veil under this, so this will be sitting on top of a veil and on top of the black silk hood and everything. But this is the general idea, as you can see. So the headdress takes the weight of the coronet, and so I'm not damaging my scalp by wearing this. But let me tell you, I can feel this is a weighty piece of jewelry. It's fantastic. Now, I've also seen these made, and this one is not. This has been fused it's been fused. Its component parts have been fused. But often you can have them made, if you would like one, so that each segment is actually completely flexible, and then it completely flexes to the headdress that it's going on. And each of these pins, these what are ornamental here, are then pins that you can insert more or fewer pieces in order to do that. So yeah, so I can hypothetically, for example, make a cloth roll if I want to wear this in some other ensemble other than with my mitre. And I probably will do that for Penzig so that I can also wear it with my Florentine ensemble. Because, coronets, yeah, right? She's pretty stunning. This is a gorgeous piece of work. Okay, now I'm going to tell you, this is the first time I've seen it, so wow, this is my genuine reaction to seeing it for the first time. When my condottiero fetched it from the courier yesterday, of course, the box looked like it had been little damaged, crushing in transit. So he wanted to, of course, make certain that the item inside was okay. So at the post office, he actually opened it up, and everyone there, staffed entirely by Koreans, but there were a bunch of American soldiers there picking up their mail. Their eyes got really big and wide, and they were just absolutely stunned at this piece. And they looked at it and they said, "Wow, that thing must be what, $5,000, $10,000?" No, it looks like it should be that. It is quite a piece of craftsmanship. And you can see on this one, the details on the finishing. Let's see if I can the camera will hopefully focus. The details on the finishing, it's really just so nice and neat and clean on the inside. No rough edges, nothing here that's going to snag on veils or snag on hair. I mean, okay, so hair could still get wrapped around these bits, but it's not because they're sharp, it's just because they're bits. And that's just what hair does. Yeah, the quality of workmanship here is really sans pareil. It's, yeah, wow, really nice. So of course I picked this one. They Armour and Castings has several. I was actually just looking up their website. Armour and Castings has several. If I'd really planned this in any kind of real way other than my excitement over, oh my God, it's here, I want to show everyone, I would have actually had this website open already. I'm sorry, guys. I was just so excited. I'm juggling about 10 irons right now. So I've got quite a lot of things going on, and I'm not necessarily devoting full attention to things like live stream setup. I apologize. If you guys have any questions or you want to see any specific piece, let me know. So this coronet, I think this one was based on an extant one from the 14th century. And I have no problem wearing this as, you know, my 15th century person, because jewelry like this, regalia jewelry, was not, very rarely was de rigueur. It was not the latest and greatest in coronet fashions, right? These sorts of things were handed down from generation to generation for centuries in some cases, and weren't necessarily updated. I mean, the Charlemagne's coronation crown was used for centuries, mostly unchanged. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, so this is St. Margaret's burial crown. It's 13th century. And it's a burial crown, so it may or may not have actually, you know, ever been used in real life as a crown or coronet, but it certainly looks like the ones that we see in the visual, the iconographic record from the 13th and 14th. And I've even seen this style definitely in 15th century iconography, which is why I don't object to using it for my 15th century self, because it definitely looks a lot like things you will see in 15th century iconography. You know, regalia is often not as subject to the vicissitudes of fashion and change as clothing is, right? And you can see that in the fact that court clothing, which is also a form of regalia, often goes mostly unchanged for centuries, to the point where by the time you get to the modern era and you see some of the coronation garments for, say, the Queen of England, you think, wow, that's really old-fashioned looking. Yeah, because in some ways it's, you know, Baroque or Georgian or even Renaissance, or in some cases medieval still. So yeah, so this one is it's stored in the Hungarian National Museum. And yeah, so it is the original piece. It's, you know, one of the remarkable things about is how, you know, wonderfully preserved it is. The original is apparently silver gilt. This is gold electroplated, which, you know, is the modern answer to gilding. Gilding, if you've ever tried to gild metal, I have. It's quite a struggle. Yeah. And the original looks like it's jointed instead of fused like this. Yeah, I think I will be honest, I think I would have preferred it to not be fused, to be jointed, because then that would give me a lot more flexibility. But that's a lesson for you. If you commission a piece or you order a piece, any piece, I mean, jewelry, clothing, anything, you will need to be super duper specific about your wants, because what you assume might be just taken for granted or be automatic with your commission might not be in the artisan's mind. I have learned this the hard way from commissioning, specifically mostly commissioning hanbok, but also from commissioning evening gowns, mostly here in Korea, modern evening gowns. Because of course my historical stuff I make myself, so I've never had a problem with commissioning things because I know what I want when I make my things. Jewelry, though, I've never made. So if I were to order another coronet, and I probably will because why have just one? I would definitely emphasize that I would like it jointed so that it has more flexibility about fitting over top of headdresses and whatnot. Yeah. So any questions about this amazing piece? Because of supply chain issues, this actually was delayed because they were unable to get the right stones. They were on order for a long time and they only lately finally came in. So yeah, now the piece is finished. It's pretty splendid. Now, Armour and Castings, if you look up crown on the Armour and Castings website, you will see some pretty, they have multiple options, and they've got one that I might go for next, which is pretty splendid, but it's also, it's also, in my opinion, more of a royal crown rather than a committal crown. I'm not trying to promote myself up the chain, shall we say. Yeah, but they have this crown, the crown of Zadar, given to Elizabeth of Bosnia by King Louis I of Hungary. And so it's actually from the later 14th century. She was a queen of Poland, and the original is also in the Hungarian National Museum. I might go for that next. Medieval crown number 4 is on the Armour and Castings page, but it's pretty stunning. And there's a couple of others that have survived, and not just prince and princess ones, but also ducal ones. So Margaret of York had a ducal coronet, a duchess coronet, a duchessal coronet, I guess, that is, some of you, I no doubt many of you have probably seen it, this one. And there's a lot of discussion about, this, this coronet, and, whether it is, was actually worn by her, if it was actually the size, or if it was reduced to be a votive coronet. Or sorry, this is Mary of Burgundy's. Sorry, not Margaret of York. Margaret of York's is a different one. Hers also survived. This is Mary of Burgundy's. So there's all this debate about whether this was actually ever worn, if it was just a votive crown, because it's tiny. This thing is so tiny. It's 180 millimeters by 100 millimeters. So it's like this big. So, even though, she was probably smaller than the average modern woman this day, this is still pretty small. So, there's a question of whether it was just meant to be votive in the sense of it was created and then donated to the church where it was housed, the Brotherhood of the Holy Blood, a confraternity. To be put on a Virgin Mary statue, right? Or if she wore it and then it was donated. So there's a lot of debate about that. Some people say, well, it was probably cut down to fit the statue, as garments that were donated in the late Middle Ages and Renaissance often were. They were donated, then they were cut down to fit on Virgin Mary statues, which is one of the few ways that these things actually survive, is when they do get donated to be used as votive items, then they don't get melted down, then they don't get recycled into other garments. They just kind of get cut down to fit the statues in question. There is another lovely coronet. Anne of Bohemia's coronet is a pretty famous one. But here's a bust of, that's a bad example because it's a post-life one. Here is a famous piece, a coronet, the crown of Blanche of Valois. And this was actually found in a hoard, as I recall. It actually has 10 articulated sections, and this one is in Poland. Found in Poland. You're going to notice a trend. A lot of these crowns and coronets that have survived are in what is considered to be Eastern Europe. So Hungary, Poland. For whatever reason, I actually don't have the answer to this. Maybe some of you do from that part of the world, why coronets are more likely to survive in that part of the world than they are in Western Europe. This is a reliquary coronet, and there's also debate with reliquary coronets about whether they were actually ever worn, or if they were just something made that way only for a to crown the bust of a reliquary. Because often reliquaries were created to fit the specific body piece of the saint or martyr or holy person that they were encasing. And so if it was a bust, say it was the skull of the person, they would make a bust so that the skull would be encased in the bust. And then they would make a coronet to go on top of the bust. So that's a reliquary coronet. Now this is the crown reliquary of the holy thorns. So it was therefore specifically made to house the holy thorn, the thorns that were supposedly placed around Christ's head, presumably. Yeah, this one was probably unlikely ever actually worn. It was probably made specifically to encase the so-called holy thorns, right? But sometimes things could be repurposed. So, one never knows in some cases. Oh, look, here's another Bohemian crown. The crown of Wenceslaus, King Wenceslaus, quite splendid. And one thing you're going to notice, if you look at the stones here, some of them are faceted. There's actually a little bit of faceting. These two were faceted, for instance. But the others, and this was faceted, but this one was not. This one is a cabochon. This one is kind of mostly just smoothed out, but left in probably its sort of natural state. So this faceting is something that wasn't done almost at all in the early medieval period and only starts to appear gradually as the medieval period wears on. And here, these are cabochons. These are round. So they're probably flat on the back and they're round on the front. And that is, the most common treatment for stones, for semi-precious and precious stones. Up until the 15th century, you start seeing more faceting. By the 16th century, it's pretty extensive, the practice of faceting, rather. So, and I have some theories about that. I have theories that the tools for cutting became more precise as the medieval period wore on, and so it became more possible to facet these stones without destroying them from cracking or waste. And also, I had a theory about lighting, that as the medieval period wore on, lighting technology became more sophisticated, affluence grew throughout Europe, and so there was more ability to actually light interior spaces more brightly and for longer periods, and therefore you would want the faceting on the gems to capture the increased amount of lighting that was available in interior spaces. That is completely my theory. I have zero evidence of that. That's just pure speculation and logic putting together sort of a series of thoughts and realizations about technology in the Middle Ages. So I'm just saying that's all me. Don't say I swore this based on some kind of solid archaeological evidence. Just thoughts I had, just sharing them. And there, I thought Blanche of Valois' coronet was in here, but maybe it's not. If it isn't, look up. Not Blanche. Sorry. Anne of Bohemia. Look up Anne of Bohemia's coronet. It's really splendid. Oh, right. Here is a ducal coronet. I know some of you are interested specifically in ducal coronets. So this is the crown of the Dukes of Burgundy. And this one dates to John the Fearless's period. So 1404 to 1419. Ooh, he died in 1419. So it must have been commissioned by John the Fearless. That was Philip the Good's father. And this one is in Dijon in the Museum of Fine Arts, Musée des Arts. And you can see it's been used because it's a little worn, but it's still really a lovely piece. And of course, I'm a huge fan of fleur-de-lis for various reasons. Some of the back pieces are missing, and it's constructed in a very interesting way. So you can actually, it looks like one could actually insert these pieces and change them out if one wished, and that some of the ones on the back are now missing. Yeah. Some people ask me, well, when would you wear such a thing? I mean, to the shower, to brush my teeth. Obviously, there's never a bad time to wear a coronet. No, seriously, I would not wear my coronet into the shower. No, so coronets in medieval Europe have a long tradition. And, if you think about crowns and the idea of a crown, it, goes back to antiquity, right? To ancient Egypt. They had, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom each had a separate kind of crown. And then when the two kingdoms were united, then you had the combined crown of north and south. So coronets and crowns decorative headpieces meant to convey rank seems to be a really ancient concept, which to me is really fascinating because it spans cultures as well. I mean, Joseon, Korea, was known as a land of 1,000 hats because they had a hat to symbolize every kind of thing, every rank, every station in society, every function, every religious practice. They had a special hat for mourning. They had, so everyone across the globe seems to view the head as a place to put a symbol of some sort, whatever that symbol represents. It's a place for symbolic representation, for the display of symbolic representation. So, in the Middle Ages, coronets were probably mostly used for ritual purposes. It is highly unlikely that the king walked around wearing a crown all the time. Obviously, during coronation ceremonies, during investitures, coronets were regalia, crowns and coronets. They were brought out for ritual occasions when emphasis on the ceremony was required, when emphasis on making the intangible tangible was required. A coronet, a crown, if you think about it, is just another way that humans have devised to make intangible, untouchable ideas and concepts really literally touchable. You can hold this in your hand and feel the weight of rank literally in your hands or on your head. Right? So in that sense, it's a visual symbol to the people looking at it. But let me tell you, when you put this on your head, you feel it. It's not so heavy that it hurts, but it's on there. So it's almost a reminder to the wearer that this is the weight of your responsibility. At least that's my theory. And there's probably someone probably in the, across the course of the many centuries of the Middle Ages probably wrote something to that effect about the meaning of the crown or the coronet. There are entire coronation ceremonies that have survived from the Middle Ages, from, the first millennium going forward. And there's an entire section in all of them for the placement of the crown and the process of that. And I'm trying to remember if there's language in the one that we used for our coronation ceremony about the meaning of the crown, but probably there is in at least one of them. So, these would not be worn just casually in your normal day-to-day life, because remember, royalty and nobility was not just a privilege, it was a job in the Middle Ages. You had things to do every day. These people did not sit around eating sweetmeats and getting fat. They had very busy lives too. The Dukes of Burgundy were known to awaken at dawn, hear mass, and then go do some training, combat training, as they needed to. And then they were in council all day, and the ladies of manors had to run the estates, and this was a job. So these sorts of things were not worn every day all the time, which might be at contrast to the way you see them being used in certain medievalist organizations. I like wearing a coronet on my mitre because it helps it weigh it down against things like wind. So for me, it's practical in addition to decorative, So the idea of wearing something like this all the time, probably not so much. Yeah. She is a very beautiful piece, and it is gorgeously put together. Armour and Castings has once again outdone themselves. Yeah, I think I definitely might go for the medieval crown number 4 next time, because she's pretty beautiful. Yeah. So, any questions about this piece? Oh, no, mitre, sorry. Mitre is the 15th century English word for this headdress. Some of you probably call it a hennin, but that is not correct. And I apologize for those who've heard this lecture before. Hennin is what the Victorians thought these were called, based on one and only one reference from the 14 teens from a French sermon preacher preaching against the headdress, against something, the headdresses that women were wearing, but he doesn't call the headdress a hennin. what he says is, you know, the women put these, I'm paraphrasing, but the women wear these elaborate headdresses, and it is the height of vanity. And the boys chased after them, crying out, "Oh, Anna, oh, Anna." But we don't know what that actually means. We know to the oh, but Anna is not a word that appears in any French. There's a French Latin dictionary from this era, actually, the Catholicon, and it doesn't mention that. And the other thing is that when that priest was writing that sermon, the only time that word appears in the entirety of pre-Victorian history, as far as we can tell, this was not the style of headdress they were wearing. This is the 1460s, 1450s at the earliest going forward. 14 teens, they were wearing an arrangement of veils and wire and hair to create that effect. So it's not actually called a hennin. In the sources, these are referred to possibly as bonnets, definitely referred to as miters for specifically the tall kind. They're also referred to as horns in some of the texts in English. In French, that's called an haut à tour, which literally just means a tall headdress, sometimes also called a corne, which means a horn, right? So yeah, mitre is not the fabric, mitre is the headdress. So for those who just now joining, I was saying I like to wear this. I like to wear my coronets in general with my tour because I wish I had a lady in waiting to actually verify that this is on correct, because it actually weighs it helps weigh the mitre down, but also the mitre keeps it from actually, you know, the heavy metal from actually like making any kind of impression on my scalp, which is nice. Yeah, and it actually will help keep it on when there's wind. So that text I read from the second half of the 15th century in France about the wind whipping the ladies' haut à tour from their heads, this stops that from happening. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for subscribing and joining, and I really hope you enjoy my extensive content. Yeah, so for those who are just joining, this coronet is a replica of an original in the National Hungarian Museum. This one actually dates to the 13th century, and though this one is rigid, the original is not. It's hinged so that this would actually, you know, move more fluidly with your head. And, you know, each of these little beautiful trees would basically pull out, and you could add pieces or take pieces away as necessary. Yeah, this is electroplated, gold electroplated. It's brass on the inside. And each piece is cast, and then it's assembled. So this is not cast as one solid piece. So if you look on the inside here, you can see it's all been smoothed over and finished beautifully, but you can still see the places where the components were riveted together. And there's no edges here. Nothing is sharp. There is nothing that's going to tear or pull on a veil or a headdress or hair. I said that earlier, but a lot of people have just now joined. And so each of these pieces is cast separately, and then the stones are set, and then they are assembled together and, you know, soldered together, and then it is electroplated. Well, it's probably electroplated first, yeah. Probably do the electroplating before you assemble it, because otherwise you'll end up with unevenness. And also then your gems might get electroplated as well. The medieval practice for jewelry often is to gild a piece. So yes, of course, they did make crowns and coronets out of solid gold, out of solid silver. And I have worn a crown out of solid silver, and wow, talk about heavy. That one though was like this tall. They affectionately called it the Nazgul coronet. It's actually based on Anne of Bohemia's coronet. Anyway, so, you know, they could be made out of brass or out of some even less precious metal, and then it could be gilt. Now, gilding is a process of taking thin layers of gold foil and applying it to the metal with a specific set of adhesives and tools. And I have tried my hand at gilding. I have mad respect for people who are actually good at it, because it is a true art just the process of gilding metal is a true art, to actually get it to adhere in the right degree, to make it look good, and so that there's no excess adhesive or stickiness about it. Yeah. Can you choose the stones? That is a good question. I would bet. So the question was, can you choose the stones? So I would bet, and I wish I coordinated this better. I could have definitely had Armour and Castings participate and answer these questions. I'm sorry, I was just so excited. I got this yesterday and I just wanted to share it as quickly as possible before life sweeps me away. So the website says pearls can be mounted as a custom edition. So probably you could, I'm pretty confident, because they make these like one at a time. These are not mass produced, right? This is a handcraft. So I'm pretty certain that if you want different stones in different colors, you could absolutely choose that. I'm like 99.9% certain. They definitely accept custom commissions. Now, obviously, if you choose different stones or more expensive stones, then that will, of course, the price will go up. But probably if you accept the same kind or grade of stone or glass in, the same category, then just a different color, then that won't affect the price. But yeah, you can definitely choose the stones. You can have pearls added. Remember, anytime you commission a piece from actual craftsmen instead of, a factory operated by slave labor in China, then you can actually ask for customizations like that. And as long as it's in the technology, within the technology of the piece, then yeah. And Armour and Castings is really good about accepting custom work and, custom modifications. So this is electroplated, and that is basically the modern equivalent of gilding. It's much, much easier to electroplate than it is to gild. And, you get this beautiful shine to it. So it's brass on the inside. Brass. It's brass on the inside, and then according to the declaration, and gilt gold-plated on the outside. Hence this beautiful shine. So yeah, this will in candlelight. This will just be magnificent. Now I actually have to look up how to care for gold electroplated pieces in a way so that they stay shiny without removing the electroplating. Yeah. Pretty magnificent. Okay, let's see other things about this. So these are fleur-de-lis, right? And the symbol of my house, my heraldry, is a gold fleur-de-lis, so that works out. But it's the fleur-de-lis, for those who don't know, is actually the stylized heraldic representation of an iris in bloom. If you think about an iris, and you've got the petals that go off to the side, and then the central petal, and then there's another petal that opens in the front, and then you have the stamina that come out of it. That is what a fleur-de-lis is. It is an iris in bloom, and it's just sort of the stylized version of it. And the Florentine version, the Florentine giglio, you can really see it. It's much more obvious on the Florentine version that it's a stylized iris, and it's been used to symbolize royalty. Going back in France for, the turn of the first millennium, basically. And I've always loved the fleur-de-lis from my youngest memories. I always thought, what a beautiful symbol. And so I chose the fleur-de-lis as my heraldry a long time ago, and it just kind of worked out that is the primary shape on most medieval coronets and crowns is the fleur-de-lis. And actually, I don't know why that is. I'm not certain if it's because of the French, that being the French heraldry, or what. The earlier ones, it's a trefoil. So this was made in like 1206, but the earlier coronets, it's a trefoil, like Charlemagne's coronet, which is sadly not in here. And here you can see the combination of the fleur-de-lis alternating with a trefoil. Trefoil, trefroid, three-leaf, the three lobes. Here is a 16th and 16th century bust that was added to in the 19th century of Isabella la Católica, but this was made in the 16th century after she lived and died. So, you know, whether this coronet actually represents the kind of coronet she would have worn is a different question. Now, we do have images of Isabella la Católica with a coronet on, with a crown on. So we can actually, you could actually compare that against hers to see if that's just a 16th century fantasy of 15th century people or a reality. Let's see. I wanted to show you all, but it's not in this one. Oh, it's in my, I think it's in my Royal Jewels book. Or not my history of jewelry book, which covers jewelry from the first millennium to 1600. There's a picture of Anne of Bohemia's coronet in there, I think. Yeah, Anne of Bohemia's coronet is pretty impressive. Okay, are there any questions about this piece? So it weighs, according to the declaration, I said this earlier, but I'll say it again, it weighs about 1 pound, 1 ounce. And that feels about right. And I will also be wearing it probably for formal occasions with my Florentine, my Italian clothing when it's actually some kind of ceremony, some kind of ritual occasion. But I will probably not wear it with my Italian things during balls, unless it's some kind of ball where there's people of rank in attendance, and then I would probably wear it as part of that pomp and circumstance. Italy, of course, was not a monolith. There were republics like Florence, there were city-states like Florence, there were city-states that were duchies or marquisdoms or baronies, and so you had a mix of cities run by councils and cities run by lords and ladies. And, you know, so there are definitely coronets being worn in Italy for ceremonial occasions in the 15th century. Probably not by citizens of Florence, mind you, but by people who would attend, and not in the 15th century anyway, by people who would attend. You know, Florence was often host to great personages like, you know, the Dukes of Milan, the Dukes of Ferrara, Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope. So, you know, they were accustomed to seeing people with rich ceremonial coronets on their heads come through, and they would host great festivities for them, which is some of the best, the chronicles of those are some of the best window into spectacle and events and festivities from the era. It's really quite lovely to read such things. But, you know, would a citizen of Florence living in Florence wear something like this? No, absolutely not. A citizen of Florence who had married into a noble family? Yes, but probably not while in Florence again. Yeah. So yeah, I am super, super happy with this. Really impressed. So beautiful. Yeah, definitely. The only thing I would change about another one is I would want it to be actually made in joints that actually move, so that it has more flexibility about fitting over my various headdresses, because I do wear a variety of headdresses, of course. Yeah. Okay, well, are there any questions, anyone, comments? I open up the floor to questions about anything at this point. You know, if you have questions about any of the projects or any of the videos of mine you've seen lately, maybe you wanted me to answer anything about that, I am definitely happy to chat about that. While I'm giving you all a chance to catch up and make comments or questions, if you haven't already done so, please do hit the thumbs up. And when the video publishes, if you could just go and leave even just an emoji in the comment section. You know, I'm a slave to the algorithm, and the algorithm thinks that even an emoji in the comments is engagement. So, you know, that's the game I have to play in order to keep doing this and get the channel to grow to the point where I can focus my attention on it and not have to go find other gainful employment. It prevents me from creating content. I will be at Penzic in less than 2 weeks, actually. I will be camped, my household encampment's name is Belfiore, but we are sharing ground with Enchanted Grounds this year, so feel free to stop by and visit. I love visitors. Note, we do run an immersive medieval camp, so it is Enchanted Grounds kind of situation where we really encourage people to really step back into the courtly medieval culture and avoid obviously modern discussions when in our encampment, but you're still welcome to come and give it a try. I will be teaching lots of medieval and Renaissance dance classes at Penzic. I'm hosting 2 balls at Penzic, the Red and Gold Ball on the middle Friday evening from 9 p.m. onwards in the Dance Pavilion, and then I'm having an Enchanted Picnic on the second Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. It's an immersive picnic, an in-persona picnic. There'll be dancing, there'll be delightful food, there'll be storytelling and singing and poetry. Please bring a song to sing, a poem to read, a story to tell, or just come and dance, or just come and enjoy the atmosphere. And otherwise, I will be doing live streaming from Penzic. I'm going to live stream my encampment setup so you can see what it's like to set up my glamping, my 15th century glamping experience. I will be doing laundry day again. We're going to be doing some clothing fitting. I have some troubleshooting to do on a gown I haven't worn in over 14 years. And so yeah, there's going to be some live streams coming up. I'm also going to do some live stream walks around Penzic for those who might like to just tune in and literally see what it's like and just walk around with me. So yeah, stay tuned for those notifications as they come out. Hopefully, for those who are interested, you'll actually get notification in a reasonable time. Okay, any other questions? Trying to see if this is actually trying to keep this in shot since this is the focus of this live stream. I'm just going to give the chat sometimes lags, so we'll see if anything pops up. While the chat lags, there was a thought I just had. Oh, coronations. Of course, crowns were heavily used during coronations, and the peers of the realm would definitely wear their coronets during the ceremony. And one of the interesting parts of the coronation ceremony for at least Western European kings, the ceremonies I've seen for both France and England, their coifs are involved. And there was actually a coif would be placed on the king or queen's head, and then they would be anointed with holy oil, and then they would actually burn the queen's coif afterwards. Not the king. The king would actually wear, both of them. They would actually then wear them for like 5 days, these anointed coifs, and then at the end they would actually burn the coifs of that period. It's a very interesting part of the ritual. Let me see. Question. Can you include your Marketplace Penzic vlog where you would purchase eating utensils for those who might have forgotten to include them? The first time goer. Yeah. Yes, so I will definitely do that. And I will obviously be sussing out the lay of the land to see which merchants are actually there this year, and then recommend places to go for that. So, it's funny, people always talk about medieval eating utensils, but the reality is that medieval eating utensils were mostly your fingers. Fingers, knives, and spoons. And, forks were not. And there's a lot of debate about this, but there shouldn't be, because if you actually read the sources and listen to what they're telling you and look at the imagery, forks existed. There were giant meat forks, which were used literally for cooking and for carving meat. So you'd have this largish fork like this, but 2 prongs, mind you, not 3 or 4 prongs. And you would use that to secure the meat, and then you have your knife, and then you carve, right? Carving was an art in the Middle Ages, by the way, and each a king would have dukes carve for him, a duke would have counts carve for him, a count would have barons or marquis carve for him, right? So everyone had the next lowest rank carving for them, but that means that everyone learned how to carve. Young men, it was pretty much only men who were carvers, actually learned to carve as part of their page training when they would join a royal court or a court from about 5 years onward, right? So it was a fine art. It's an art that's sort of been lost for the most part, medieval carving anyway. And meat would be carved into pieces, fish also, would be carved or cut into pieces that were right for eating with your fingers, right? And that you wouldn't have to then cut it, and that were bite size. So you could dip this bite-sized piece into your sauce and then eat that with your fingers without having to further cut it on your own plate. There's actually, there is this book called the Book of Caring. It's a book of medieval manners and etiquette from the 15th century, and it appears in different editions kind of from the 15th through the 16th century. And it actually specifies how to carve each different kind of meat and fish so that it is the right size for consumption. And so The point of this is that forks were part of serving. There are a few extant small forks. They're usually about this big. And again, two-pronged. And they were used also for serving, for fetching delicacies from the communal bowl on the table and putting it on your plate, but not for bringing that thing then to your mouth, right? It was so that your fingers, so like especially sweetmeats, like candies and desserts, sweet type things, they would, yeah, I know that's a little confusing. Sweetmeat is not meat. Sweetmeats are like gingerbread or sugar paste or candied citrus peel. Those are sweetmeats. Sweetbreads are offal, like the kidneys and pancreas and that sort of thing. Anyway, I know, confusing, isn't it? Yeah. Sweetmeats, you would use this delicate little fork, and it was something that was, only the upper crust had this. You would use your fork to pull the sweetmeats from the little beautiful dish and put them on your plate. You would not use it to put to your mouth, because then you've put to your mouth the thing that should be used for getting food from the serving dish. So yeah, there's this weird idea that, well, in Italy they had forks, yeah, but there's no evidence that they used them to eat until like the very end of the 16th century. And even then it's not really great solid evidence. So if you look at the pictures of tables set for eating, everywhere in Europe, you will notice there is an utter dearth of forks. There are no forks anywhere to be seen. There's some spoons and there are knives, and that's it. And the books of etiquette, some of them actually specify which fingers should be used for each kind of food, right? Spoons are obviously used for soups and liquids and pottages. I guess that should go without saying, but then I think about Indian curry and how in India and a lot of places they use bread and fingers to eat even a saucy curry. But anyway, there was a finger was assigned for salt, a finger was assigned for fish, a finger was assigned for meat, and that in combination with your thumb. And that's why there were aqua manils at tables, and why there were actually dishes of water for your fingers so that you could wash your fingers between servings. Yeah. So yeah, I will definitely at Pennsic, I will go around and see what sort of utensil vendors are there, and that are actually selling knife sets sharpened. Now, often a medieval knife set comes with a knife, and then it also comes with this, and if I thought this question was going to be posed, I would have brought mine out. It comes with what people wrongly call a pricker, a long metal steel. That metal steel is actually a multi-tool. It is used for honing the edge of your knife. It is used for poking holes when you need them in clothes or in leather straps. It's good for getting knots out of rope, right? So the knife and awl was a multi-tool set. It was the medieval multi-tool set. It was the Swiss knife of its day, because with that knife and that awl, you could pretty much do almost anything you needed to do in terms of, fixing things, working things out in your day-to-day life, eating, right? That was your multi-tool set. So yeah, I will see at Pennsic who is selling what. And I might take you all on the first initial exploration. We'll see. I have a really good Osmo steady stick for the camera this year, so we should have some really good quality footage this year. Here's hoping. Okay, any other questions? Requests for Pennsic, requests for future live stream? I will be doing a live stream Monday morning my time. That will be Friday evening in the Americas and kind of middle of the night in Europe. I was going to do one tomorrow night as well, which would be midday Europe, but we're going to Gyeongju tomorrow, and we're going to go see it's lotus blossom season here in Korea. So we're going to go to Gyeongju, and we'll probably won't be getting back until late, because evening is honestly the best time to see Gyeongju. So I won't be doing one tomorrow, but I will be doing a live stream sip and chat on Monday morning, my time, which again is afternoon, evening, America's, middle of the night from Sunday to Monday, Europe. So I've actually used the awl to hone to hone my knife. Oh, sorry. Let me read the question. It's a good comment. Thank you, Nevis. Skeptical about using the awl to hone steel edges. As far as I know, honing tools were something very late in history, and they actually work pretty badly, and they require those ridges to do that function. I have used my awl to hone my knife, my eating knife, and it works perfectly. It gives me just enough edge to keep it sharp enough to cut meat and whatnot. Now, is it a proper sharpening tool? No, no, no. I mean, and there's a difference between honing and sharpening, which of course I know you're aware of. So yeah, it works very well for honing. It's a theory. We have no solid evidence as to what those awls could have been used for, except as, other than awls. As an awl, it's very functional because, especially someone who sews and pokes holes in things all the time to make new lacing holes. I love my awl. That's part of my knife kit. I love it. And it does work to put an edge back on my knife when it's gotten a little dull. It's not good for proper sharpening. Like, I would not say it's a sharpener. It's definitely not a sharpener. I mean, how effective it is, I guess, is up to personal opinion. And of course, you actually have to you have to get in at the right angle, which I have a lot of experience using honing because I do one of my other passions is cooking. So, I guess probably the average person might not be able to use that to very effectively hone the edge. Yeah, it's definitely not a sharpener though. I made that mistake of calling it a sharpener in one of the videos, and that was me using language too loosely. Yeah, but definitely those awls are not used for eating. They are so impractical for eating, and there's zero evidence of them having been used for eating. None of the etiquette books talk about prickers or awls or anything in the use of eating. There's no visual evidence for it. So, anyway, off that soapbox. Request intro to general period gear that would be good for people to have that might not be obvious to people early on the research end. Hygiene kits were apparently really popular. Oh yeah, so that's a good idea. Yeah, because at Penzic there are people who actually sell, hygiene kits like the, your toothpick and ear scooper, and pinchers, which are tweezers. Tweezers is the word I'm looking for. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Nevis says, I used the awl for eating a couple of times, not very convenient. Yeah, I tried it too, and like the chunk of whatever you use to pick up either slides down or slides off, or yeah, it's not, you can make it work, but it's not really the best. Your fingers are a much more effective tool. My knives are a curse word here, mystery. Yeah, they are. Okay, any other requests for Penzic? I should probably be taking notes on all this. I can actually look back at the chat afterwards. Otherwise, I am going to actually get on with my day. Thank you all for joining me on this live stream. If any questions crop up afterwards, you can just pop them in the comments. I always go and answer questions in the comments. I find that a very useful thing for both me and the community because it, gives me ideas on things I should talk about going forward and allows me to share my knowledge and experience and sometimes to even look into new things. For instance, at Penzic, I will be leading dance at the Bacchanal, which is basically kind of like 15th century people or 16th or 15th century people hosting an ancient Roman style party. And I'm going to be leading some dance. And so I'm actually doing some research into what we do know about ancient Roman and ancient Greek music and dance. And the answer about dance is almost nothing, except for what's in the visual record. No treatises have survived that provide any kind of instruction for dance. There's some theory, about the harmony of dance and the harmony of the heavenly bodies, but nothing about how you actually move your body. Some music I found out, that I didn't know this, I just now learned this. I'd heard about some music surviving from ancient Greece, but I didn't realize the extent to which it survived, much more than I had thought. So there's actually multiple papyri fragments that have fragmentary pieces of musical notation in them, and there's one stele that has an entire piece of music and a hymn preserved. I think it's called the Delphic hymn is what it's referred to. And it's The style of musical notation is actually described in a 3rd century AD treatise that has survived. And so it is actually possible to reconstruct this music and actually hear the past. So that was a very exciting discovery for me in trying to prepare something authentically either medievally classical or actually classically classical. So that's my latest rabbit hole that I just fell down like 2 days ago. Kitties, please. Oh, yes. You can still, even though I'm not on screen, you can still hear me. Let me bring the baby. Hello, baby. Hello, baby. Our little rescue kitty is getting so big. She was such a tiny little thing when we rescued her, going on 6 weeks ago, and she's just growing so happy. Sorry, she was sleeping. It's sleepy time for kitten. Yeah. I imagine any harmonies between the celestial spheres would likely be restricted to magical, religious, ritual, and ceremony. Yes. So, yeah, of course, dance for most of human civilization seems to not have been about the enjoyment of dance per se, but about the enactment of ritual, about, once again, bringing it full circle back to coronets, making the tangible or the intangible tangible, right? To make spiritual belief and spiritual power all somehow physically perceivable and experienceable. So, yeah, I have not found any evidence of dance in ancient Greece or Rome as a social activity, as something people would just do at a party, but rather something that would be part of religious ceremonies. Now, that being said, the line between religious ceremony and party often seemed to blur in the ancient world, at least in classical civilization. So, you know, what might start as a very structured, orderly ritual might eventually, according to some of the historians of the time, devolve into something less structured and more social, shall we say. But yeah, and that's actually true in most of in Asia as well. I have not been able to find any evidence of dance as a social function, as something that either women did for fun or men did for fun or men and women did for fun. It's nearly always about some kind of performance or ritual, you know, to bring the rain, to bring in a good harvest, to entertain the crown. You know, social dance seems to be a much more recent creation and seems to actually, as far as I can tell, have originated in Europe. Yeah, comment, oh sure, that level of stellar correspondence tended to be an upper class caste thing in late antiquity Rome though. Yeah, for certain, agreed. It's, you know, and obviously, as always, when it comes to lower class social customs, there is often a silence in the historical record. Or there is a prejudicial note in the historical record. So we don't, you know, what peasants were doing for fun often goes unremarked. And the further back you go, the more unremarked it becomes. You know, by the late Middle Ages, at least, we have imagery of what peasants are doing for fun. Plenty of it. We've got lots of depictions of peasants dancing, tapestries and illuminations and frescoes and outright paintings by the 16th century, right? But there's still very little in the way of discussion about what they're actually doing. So yeah, so who knows? Maybe in the lower classes, social dance was a thing, and it just, you know, it hasn't survived in the historical record. I could certainly concede that point, but I prefer to go with evidence for the positive rather than making up things to fill the negative, if that makes sense, myself. Neves says, for example, natal astrology was predominantly for the rich. Yes, absolutely. Natal astrology being, you know, the horoscope for the coming birth. As calculating charts required so much, you know, esoteric and mathematical knowledge and tools. Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, astrology in the modern world gets a bad rap because it is, you know, generally presented as a complete scam. But a lot of the astronomical advances in technology were simply to fit the need for astrology. So it's, astrology actually was a very hard science, even though you may absolutely disagree with, Mercury in retrograde having any impact on your future. That's a different conversation, obviously. Granted, it might be plausible dances practiced by the mystery cults had a stellar tie-in. However, it's delusional, however it's spelled. Yeah. I'm pretty certain that the mystery cults, like, the Mithras, the cult of Mithras, I'm pretty confident that their rites probably had a stellar tie-in, especially since most of the cults were tied to deities or semi-deities who were represented in the stars, in constellations. So I'd be shocked if there wasn't also an astrological tie-in to their rituals and practices. But that's why they're called mystery cults, because we don't know much about them. I know that's an oversimplification, but it is one of the reasons that they remain mysterious to this day, is that their practices were very secret. Hey, dear little baby, are you cleaning yourself? Yeah. Eleusinian, not delusional. Yeah, I was wondering. The autocorrect, I often find that my diction and vocabulary choice is just too high for auto-suggest, voice recognition, and autocorrect. As someone deeply enmeshed in Hellenistic and some medieval and modern astrology, modern pop astrology gives me a headache. Yeah, as it should. It's disgusting. It's what's interesting, spending so much time here in Asia, Korea specifically, but traveling around other parts of Asia, is how astrology has not deteriorated down to this pop astrology thing. There are, everywhere you go, where there are pedestrian zones, there are actually a series of vending machines where you can actually get your horoscope based on your zodiac sign, and they change those out like on a daily or weekly basis. And I see people of all ages going and getting their horoscopes. And it's, obviously the people who have the vending machines, it's a money-making venture for them. But it's still very much a going concern here, astrology. And a lot of people still go and visit shaman here in Korea for, predicting the future and ritual purposes. And some people still get charms and spells and sew them into the clothes of their loved ones or enemies in some cases. Yeah, it's really interesting how that's still a going concern here culturally. Yeah. Okay. Last chance for comments or questions. Otherwise, I am going to get on with my day. Is this the year of the dragon for Korea? Yes, it is. Yeah, Korea. So for those who don't know, what in America we call the Chinese zodiac is the zodiac in Asia. Really? No. Leave my oat alone. Go back to sleep. Seriously. Yes, the zodiac is the Chinese zodiac is the zodiac in Asia. It is the zodiac used everywhere here. And just like they don't call it Chinese New Year, they call it Lunar New Year because it's based on the lunar calendar. And it is the year of the blue dragon, in case anyone was wondering. It is the year of the dragon here. We celebrated that back in January, February. Okay, everyone. Well, my little Nabi, our little butterfly, as we think it's a she. We think it's a she. She's still kind of a little small to necessarily tell, but we're leaning more towards she than he at this point. So I'm going to go have some breakfast/lunch now. Thank you all for... Oh, yes, everywhere other than those who use Yotish anyway, yeah. Thank you all for joining me. Please hit the thumbs up. And if you're enjoying my content, please subscribe. I know, I'm sorry, I have to say it. I really do. Thank you, Tommaso. Il piacere è mio. Thank you everyone for joining me. I'll be doing a live stream sip and chat on Sunday evening America's time, middle of the night Europe time, Monday morning Asia's and Australasia time. So I hope to see you all there. Otherwise, oh, it just premiered. My next project vlog should have just premiered. Damn it, I missed the premiere because I was preparing for this. So you can check out the next chapter of my endless 15th century Florentine Gomorrah hand-sewn project vlog. Okay, everyone, really appreciate you all being here. Bye. Say bye, Nobby. Bye. Bye.